Welcome, everyone, to our May Coffee Chat. I am Laura Knutson-Murray. I am a GIS coordinator and community outreach assistant for IrisBG. With us today is Shanna Jones, our social media and community outreach assistant, and Oyvind Rustin, founder and CEO of IrisBG. Our coffee chat today will be shared in our knowledge library. As always, the presentation and write-up will be there. You can follow along and subscribe, and you will be notified that anytime something is published. And these coffee chats are for you. Get in touch with us if there's something you'd like us to talk about, or if there's something you'd like the community to address. There's a challenge. If you'd like us to give you a demonstration of the functionality, or if you have feedback on how we would improve. There isn't a fixed format for this, so you can present on anything, big or small. And hopefully you'll make some new connections today, and together we will become a little bit wiser. Coming up, our very own Shanna Jones will be presenting at the Royal Botanic Garden, Edinburgh. Free training on 2 different sessions. The first session is for all role types and permissions, and the second is for new curators, admins, botanists, curators, just to learn more about how to use IrisBG and questions in that format. And afterwards, there will be a tour, behind the scenes tour. So if you're in the UK and able to travel, it'd be great to have you there. For those of you who are in the States and in the Boston area, or attending the American Public Gardens Conference, we will be just down the road the Sunday before. It's a 12-minute train ride or Uber, if you'd like to take an Uber to get there. It's at Northeastern University, and we will have that coffee chat won't be recorded, so it'll be live and in person with real coffee cups. We'll be talking with Northeastern University, and they will present on how to train new staff. They have students that they train every 6 months on how to use IrisBG. We'll talk about fostering collective teamwork and celebrate some of the successes they've had. We will also have a hands-on tour or hands-on workshop of using the IrisBG ArcGIS sync. If you are in the Boston area, be sure to check it out. Attending this month, here's the map of where you're all coming from. And if you look a little closer in the map, if you have a yellow dot in your pin, that means you have a Garden Explorer, which is perfect for our topic today. We could launch the poll real quick, our usual poll. It's the rate your experience with IrisBG. So what is your level of experience? Are you trying out the trial, novice, intermediate, advanced? It looks like about 62% are intermediate, 20 advanced, 7 novice, and 7% trying out the trial. Great, thank you. All right, and so today we're having a great presentation from James Miller, creating engaging tours using IrisBG at the Sheffield Botanic Gardens. He's the plant records officer at Sheffield Botanic Gardens. So without further ado, we'll welcome James.
Hello, everyone. So, this is a project we've been working on a lot over the last 2 to 3 months, particularly in the curator. So it's a real pleasure, and I hope you enjoy. So this structure here is the Victorian Pavilions, and one of the most iconic structures of the gardens. So I'll just introduce what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to introduce the team and gardens here at Sheffield, our collections, creating engaging tours, and then I'm going to ask for any key questions, and then that will lead us to the whiteboard, and we'll sort of draw conclusions from that. I'd just like to sort of introduce the sort of location and geography of Sheffield Botanical Gardens to start with. So we're a botanical gardens located in the north of England, in a sort of post-industrial city today, which is famous for the steel industry. So it's really a city that's seen great change over the past 30, 40 years, from industrial to sort of post-industrial. And our location is very close to the city centre, and we're a stone's throw away from the main hospital, located outside Clark House Road area. So for that reason, we get a lot of visitation from there, sort of passing through the gardens all the time. And also we get lots of a real mix of people, sort of families in sort of very diverse sort of makeup of visitors in the gardens. You can see from this map, it's divided into some geographic zones, within the gardens, like our sort of Asian sections, we have divided into sort of China, Korea, and Japan, sort of down in south of the gardens, and then like a sort of historic features like the monarch garden and the rose garden, more traditional, and then we've got some more sort of novel parts of the garden, like the Himalayan garden and sort of ecological American prairie garden, for example, and South African beds. So here's the gardens team, and Andrea's the current head gardener in the middle, and they do a really fantastic job. And so all the sort of garden staff are employed by Sheffield City Council. So Sheffield City Council sort of manage the gardens, and the gardens are actually owned, in fact, by Sheffield Botanical Gardens Trust, and they provide money for plants and sort of historic restorations and stuff like that. Some building work, but the maintenance comes from Sheffield City Council. And then we have another organisation, the Friends of the Botanical Gardens, known as FOBs. And yeah, they sort of amazing support for the gardens and help with the management, and really large volunteer organisation. We couldn't do a lot of the important work without them, including sort of tours that we're producing at the moment and rolling out. There's some key people involved in our gardens. Education officer, Dr. Laura Alston. Yeah, she's really wonderful, doing fantastic job with our education programs at the moment. So yeah, we're sort of really reaching out to different organisations with her. Yeah, she's with our patron Laura there, Dame Hillary. So, yeah, very important person for us. And you can see over to the right, we've got Ian. He's recently involved with Gardeners Question Time, so they've recently come back and had Gardeners Question Time. I think it's the second time in 3 years they've been back. So that's like a BBC radio gardening programme. So that was just great to have them sort of come by this January. So yeah, they sort of did some of the recording in the pavilions. Yeah, that leads me just to introduce the Heritage Lottery Fund. So back in the early 2000s, we got a really large grant from them, which has made a huge amount possible at the gardens. So part of that was getting an education officer, but also the Dorothy Fox Education Centre was built from that money, and really has brought the gardens really sort of into the 21st century, I guess, and sort of restored different areas which were really sort of becoming overgrown. And in fact, the pavilions were close to sort of having to be demolished before we got this grant. So it's been a really, really wonderful thing. Here are some of the FOBs. So they have several hundred volunteers, the FOBs, but it's sort of more like 70, 80 sort of active garden volunteers within the garden approximately. Many of them are involved with plant records in the gardens. So that could be sort of passing on labels to me, sort of recording the parts of the gardens which they look after, for example, like the Himalayan section. But we have a small group who've been involved with writing tours for IrisBG. So our collection includes 3 national collections, a very large and important collection of trees from all over the world, a South African geophyte collection, to name but a few. Yeah, these are our 3 national plant collections here. So we've got Sarcococca, Derugilla and Weigela national collections at the gardens. They're excellent collections for us to have because they're sort of bulletproof, always a good thing. But also they're really ornamental and really high scientific value in there. So some of wild provenance as well. The tree collection includes many rare specimens. You saw the Sequoias sempervirens cantab earlier outside of pavilions. That is a very rare cultivar. There's only a few examples of that in the country. This rhododendron campanulatum is one of my favourites when it's out of flower. It's magnificent. The largest specimen I've ever seen of this particular rhododendron species. We have a small Australasian section within the Mediterranean garden. Quite surprising how well some of the Banksias do outside, like this Banksia marginata. For example, this was flowering a couple of years ago in the garden. And then Pete and Trish, 2 of our excellent FOBs, they've grown all sorts of really unusual South African geophytes from seed, like this Lacunalia. We also have some more novel planting schemes as well. This was American prairie planting, which James Hitchmore designed from the University of Sheffield. So we work closely with the university with PhD students from time to time, and it's really interesting how we could perhaps include these in tours in the future, and possibly incorporate them as sort of locations along the tour to really sort of show them off. So the new engaging interpretation which we're getting in the garden at the moment, which Laura's working on, a key part of that is producing these flyers and posters for around the garden, and it can be sort of laminated, put in different areas that she's rolling out at the moment. Yeah, these have been put across the garden in the last month, which has been really wonderful, I think. So the public can come in and scan this QR code, and that will bring them straight to our Garden Explorer, straight to the tours section. So it means instant access. And nowadays, almost everyone has a smartphone or iPhone or whatever, so they can just access this instantly. Now, which is a brilliant way, I think, of engaging people in a garden like ours, because we're free and open to the public all the time, like every day of the year. So if we can sort of like catch member of the public's attention in this way, it may have just been passing through the garden and to go somewhere else, but may scan this and it may sort of inspire and captivate them, which is really important, I think. Here you see the interface to our Garden Explorer when you log on to it. So you see our update map of the Botanical Gardens. This was produced roughly a year ago, and I think we've got quite a nice layout on there at the moment. But any advice on this, I'd really much appreciate that as well. Any sort of tips and pointers. I'm just going to go through a few of the tours which we currently have up at the moment. This is one which our curator, Ian Turner, has designed and rolled out. It's called Earthshot Tour. And this taps into this sort of national project Earthshot that's happening in sort of throughout the UK. There's a BBC programme about it, and sort of all family involved in this sort of Earthshot, I believe. And he sort of like linked it all in sort of throughout the gardens, which is a really clever idea. And he sort of blends garden features, say like our historic sort of entrance at Broom Hill, with sort of plants as well. So cycads and conifers, some different plants in the evolution garden. I think the Wollamy Pines on there as well. This is one of our longer tours which we have on. So it actually goes right around the circumference of the garden. So for certain visitors that may be too long potentially. So I think it's really important to have a good selection on. So this is one of the short tours which we have up on Plant Explorer. So this one sort of focuses on some of the cedrus which we have in the garden, where actually it zooms in on the 3 species of cedrus and sort of makes that into a journey in the garden. So it's quite nice to have just a short one like this to add variation. It sort of ties into sort of ethnobotany and sort of classical uses of the trees and sort of mythology and these kind of points, as well as conservation, highlighting the conservation status of the plants, like Cedrus labani and Cedrus atlantica, endangered in the wild, and sort of going into those reasons as well. Managed to record audio files for these to make them accessible and get them on the Plant Explorer. And the hope is we're going to get audio files for all our tours so that they're accessible to everyone, no matter who they are. So Dyers in Nature, this is a tour which I think it's really interesting because it sort of taps into the different uses of plants in the garden which people might not have thought about. And with these sort of taster tours or trails that they're calling them in education, the idea is that they're sort of like a taster of a longer tour which the FOBs run, the Friends of the Botanical Gardens. So it sort of infuses the public, and then they'll think about taking a sort of a full tour of the gardens with the FOBs member who runs the tours. Alison, our sort of garden historian, wrote this tour. She's also a member of the FOBs. So it's like a history taster trail, this one. So it's a mini version of a much longer tour she does of the garden. She sort of takes in key features like the pavilions and the gatehouse, which I mentioned, but also she shows off the bear pit, which is a really interesting historic feature of our gardens. in Victorian times, they kept a bear there for a short period of time, and sort of just as interest, I think the Victorians like to put stuff like this in their gardens sometimes, like wild animal, really interesting feature. And now today there's just a sort of a brass sort of statue of the bear in its place. And he also shows off the Robert Marnock garden, and he was curator at the Botanical Gardens and actually founded and designed it in 1836. One of my particular favourite tours, which has been put together recently by volunteers, is the Poisons and Magic for Halloween. And I think it's great to have some seasonal tours. So I really like the way it's it's blending Deadly Nightshade in here. Sort of not a sort of botanically not really going into the conservation and the botanical work which we do at the gardens, but perhaps capturing sort of other interests of visitors as well. We also have a tour connecting to literature. So this Shakespeare Botanicals ties into sort of lines from Shakespeare's plays and sonnets into different plants. So it could be roses, or like Othello, Desdemona tying to a specific plant cultivar in a play, for example. Quite a few plants have the name Desdemona, sort of not just roses, but also Ligularia. So you can sort of tie it into the narrative that way as well. So really quite a clever idea, I think. And another possibility is that we can sort of tie in sort of botanical education into our tours as well. We've always been working to get Sydney College to come in and sort of do part of their NVQs at the garden, but we could also tie it into RHS levels, which we're hoping to have as well somehow. That's sort of the one for the future, this project. And what we'd really like to sort of link the Iris tours more to our conservation work at the Botanical Gardens. So that could be some of the seed which we've had, which you saw on the last slide. So we've been growing seeds from Jerusalem Botanical Gardens in the Middle East. This particular lupin, Lupinus pilosus, was grown by one of our garden staff, Jim. Great that he's got quite a few stuff to germinate, but another interesting that we've been working on conservation-wise is growing seeds of Ginkgo biloba, which the curator Ian recently brought to the garden. So they were from the surviving tree in Hiroshima from the atomic bomb. So it'd be really interesting when this is planted out in the garden, perhaps to link this into a tour somehow in the future. But and that seed was donated from the mayor of Hiroshima to the mayor of Sheffield. So that's how we managed to get that seed at the Botanical Gardens. There's only a seedling at the moment, but this is actually a photograph of the original tree in Hiroshima, in Japan. Making tours more accessible, I think, is a really important, idea and thing to think about. So we've considered audio. We're going to incorporate audio into all of our tours, and perhaps creative tour ideas as well. So it's really important thinking about the audience as well. So one of our volunteers, she's written seasonal tours directed specifically for a younger audience, for children to participate in. So we have one for each season. We've got spring up at the moment, and they're sort of written in a language to engage children with. There's no botanical names in them, and they could be sort of drawing attention to features like sort of frog spawn in the pond in our rock garden, for example, things like this, or of course the bear pit, the bear in there, fun things like this, or insects, like getting them to look at insects or bluebells, things like this around the garden. So you can go on and have a look at that later on our Plant Explorer spring tour. Another couple of ideas had also, possibly touching on subjects of sort of mental health, and sort of we've got the Hallamshire Hospital sort of just across the road to kind of draw visitors in there and engage them, as well as medicinal plants, which we have in the garden. So I'm just going to introduce the key questions which we've sort of asked. So what key elements do you consider make a successful garden tour? What are the most engaging garden tour subjects that you have seen or created? How can we engage a wider audience about the conservation work Botanical Gardens do through tours? So I'd love you all to have a think about those three. So that brings me to just conclude the sort of formal part of this coffee chat. And yeah, I'd love to sort of throw it out to the audience now and have a look at some of the ideas that you put on our whiteboard. And it'd be lovely to hear some of your thoughts as well. Yeah, I hope you've enjoyed my introduction to our gardens.
Thank you, James. What a great intro. Makes me want to come visit your garden for sure.